What does all this mean? Could this lead to criminal charges? Joining me now from Leesburg, Virginia, is former U.S. federal prosecutor John Flannery. Thanks for coming on short notice, John. I appreciate it. The Wall Street Journal, as you know, is reporting that Mueller has impaneled a grand jury. Reuters is reporting the grand jury has already issued subpoenas related to that June 2016 meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner, a Russian lawyer, and some others. How do you read these latest developments? It can be good, right?
Well, we've gotten into the next chapter of this investigation. That is where they're getting ready to compel people both to appear and to give evidence. They've conducted an investigation to prepare for this stage, and so this is a very dangerous stage for all these people who are out there talking about not having done this and not having done that. In particular, like you focused on already, the June 9th, 2016 meeting will be critical, but there are two chapters to that. There's the actual occasion, and then there's what many of us consider the cover-up afterwards, which would be to obstruct any investigation of the very connection between the Trump campaign, Trump himself, his son-in-law, and the Russians, and the quid pro quo that exchanged between them. So it's a pretty sensational development, and it comes on a day when Congress is protecting the special prosecutor, the special counsel of getting removed.
So, John, if you were in Mueller's shoes, I mean, does this sound like he would have to subpoena the principals of the meeting, like Jared Kushner and Donald Trump Jr.?
Exactly. The common sense of it is to call everyone in and to decide what sequence makes sense. I would call Trump Jr. first. I think he's the weakest link in the whole group. He would be a terrible witness. He's been terrible so far, and he will be just as bad in the grand jury.
Doesn't this raise...
his counsel,
go ahead, finish.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, if I was his counsel, I'd tell him that silence is golden, no matter how public a person you consider yourself.
Doesn't this suggest that we're going to have to talk again about the question of whether Trump will try to fire Mueller? Because this all sounds like it's getting awfully close.
Well, I think it's become very hard to fire Mueller at this stage. He has a gang of 17 ready, like was the case of Watergate, to go against this investigation. They've tracked money as best they can by other means, I'm sure. And I think they're ready to go, and Congress is about to pass legislation that says you can't fire Mueller with a court reviewing it. I think the president's in a very difficult position.
Trump has already said, I believe the New York Times, that it would be a red line that Mueller should not cross to get into his personal finances. At the same time, we're hearing that that's exactly what Mueller is doing.
Yes.
Does it have to have anything to do with Russia? I mean, if there was money laundering or Russian money in the Trump financial empire, but it has nothing to do with the Russia investigation. But may yet be criminal. Is that kosher? Is that okay to go after that too? The White House says no.
I think it's I think it's kosher, and I'll tell you why. Because I doubt that the medium of exchange was just presidency for killing the sanctions, because the sanctions themselves, from the standpoint, was his concern about own funds that were being tied up around the world. On top of that, if there's one thing that informs us who Trump is, it is his concern about funds. We're looking at all the real estate deals years ago and the statements made that they had so much money from Russia. So the quid pro quo may be more than you just getting into office. It may also involve funds, and these have been discussed before. And I'm sure that that's what they're looking at. And the word was, and again, it's a rumor because I don't think it was confirmed, that Mueller was asking for the tax returns of Mr. Trump. And plainly, he's been looking at other financial records, and they've been looking at what's been going on with mobsters in New York and the transfer of monies to Russians for real estate in the United States. So I think it's all related, and I think it'd be hard to stop it. And I think that Mueller has reached a point where he's figured it's time that we have to just go. Well, he's not going public, but he has to get the business done.
Finally, help me if you can with the timelines here. We presume that if there is a grand jury, they've already got some evidence to lay before the grand jury and some witnesses to produce. Could this nevertheless drag on for months before we hear any results?
Oh, sure, it could. And this is the way the grand jury works. It's an instrument of the prosecutor. They talk about it as a shield to shield the anonymity of the people investigated. Obviously, it has no effect like that in this case. And what the prosecutor can do is for the next 18 months, he could take this one grand jury and use it for investigations. And then he could impanel another grand jury to hear that testimony that wasn't violative of any constitutional right and pack together an indictment against one or several or more people. And one of the big debates is whether or not you can indict the president of the United States. And there's a lot of authority that you can. And given how difficult impeachment would be on the Hill, I think that the lawyers look pretty carefully, as they did in the Water investigation. There's a 50-page memo saying you can do that.
Wow, you just said a mouthful. Thank you to John Flannery, former federal prosecutor. You packed some interesting information in there. Thanks again.
Glad to be of service. Nice to talk to you.
Now then.